Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and this is day 14 of the 80 Days to Your Dream Body course. Today's protein source is going to be venison steak, and today is a shoulders and arms training workout. And the theme for today's workout is going to be practical applications. So I'm going to be taking everything that I've taught you over the last 13 days and coming up with some real world workouts that you can incorporate. Now let's get started. And while we were resting, let's continue on with the practical applications. Let's say somebody comes to you, they're presenting with low back pain, knee pain, and neck pain. They have 60 minutes to train. You performed a postural assessment on them, and you found that they had pronated feet, valgus knees, their hips were in flexion, they had an anteverted pelvis, hyperlordosis of the lumbar spine, hyperkyphosis in the thoracic spine, a protracted scapula, medially rotated humerus, and their elbows were in flexion with a forward head carriage. This may sound very complex, but this is actually quite common. You're going to see this very often if you ever begin treating patients. And what you would do in something like this is you would start off with some mobilization work. To treat the pronation of the feet and also the valgus knees, what you could do is something like a half kneeling dorsiflexion with a dowel rod. This would help with the ankles and knees. You could then do an active straight leg raise to help with the pelvis and hips. And then for the thoracic spine, you could do a thoracic foam roller mobilization where they're extending over the foam roller to improve their thoracic extension. That mobilization would take approximately 5 to 10 minutes. Then, for the actual corrective exercise portion, you could have them do a Poliquin step up. That will help to strengthen their VMO. Then you could have them do a sideways neutral grip, hand over opposite hip external rotation, which will help with their lateral rotators of the shoulder. You could do a front foot elevated low pulley cable split squat to help with their hip, knee, and ankle biomechanics. And then you could do a mid pulley trap 3 raise to help with the protraction of the scapula. Then you could do some low pulley cable pull-ins. This is going to help with the hyperlordosis in the lumbar spine by strengthening the abdominal cavity. And then we could finish off with an extensor chain wall lean. This is going to be great for correcting the forward head posture. Then, once we finished all of the corrective exercises, we can move on to the myofascial stretching. We could start off with a myofascial stretching exercise for the psoas major. This is going to help with the hyperlordosis in the thoracic spine. We could do a myofascial stretching exercise for the rectus femoris, which is going to help with the anterior pelvic tilt and the flexion of the hips. And we could also do a myofascial stretching exercise for the pectoralis major, which is going to help with the protracted scapula and the medial rotation of the humerus. But our time is up. Time for set number 2. And while we're resting, let's continue on with the practical applications. Let's say somebody comes to you and they are presenting with neck and shoulder pain. They only have 20 minutes to train, and the only equipment they have available are bands. You performed a postural assessment on them, and you found that they had high arches or supinated feet. They had varus knees, an anterior pelvic tilt, hypolordosis in the lumbar spine, hypokyphosis in the lower thoracic spine, hyperkyphosis in the upper thoracic spine, protracted scapulas, and medially rotated humerus, along with forward head carriage. You performed a mobility assessment on them, and you had a positive Apley scratch test. And when performing a stability assessment on them, you found that they had very weak VMOs, quadratus lumborum, rotator cuff muscles, and scapular retractors. In this case, what you could do is start out with some mobilization exercises. For the lumbar and thoracic spine, you could do the Mackenzie press up for 20 repetitions at a 3-3 tempo. So you're inhaling for 3 and exhaling for 3. That would be for the lumbar spine. And then for the thoracic spine, you could do a thoracic arm raise exercise. Once again, you can perform 20 repetitions. This will take approximately 5 minutes to do that warm up. Then we can move on to the corrective exercises. For the corrective exercises, we can perform a Peterson step up for 25 repetitions at a 1-0-1-0 tempo. That would address the weakness in the vastus medialis obliquus. Then we could perform some external rotation work with the bands. You could have them hold the bands, and you're going to perform an isometric contraction. So they're going to laterally rotate their shoulders and do that for 3 sets of 12 repetitions with a 5-second isometric contraction. Then, in order to work on the scapular retractors, things like the rhomboids major and minor and the middle fibers of the trapezius, we could do something like a rear fly with the bands. Same thing, we could do 3 sets of 12 with a 5-second isometric hold, and that would be great for working on the scapular retractors. And we could finish off with the extensor chain wall lean. Do 1 set of 180 seconds. That will take 11 minutes. And then we're left with a few extra minutes to do some myofascial stretching. We could do the myofascial stretching for the pectoralis major to help with the medially rotated shoulders and the protracted scapula. We could do the myofascial stretching exercise for the anterior deltoid. That would also help with the medial rotation in the shoulders. And then we could finish off with some PNF stretching of the suboccipitals. That will help with the forward head carriage. But our time is up. Time for set number 3. And while we're resting, let's continue with the practical applications. Let's say somebody comes to you, they're presenting with neck pain and knee pain. They only have 30 minutes to train and they have no equipment whatsoever. All they have is their own body. You performed a postural assessment on them and you found that they had pronated feet or collapsed arches, valgus knees, their hips were in flexion, they had an anterior pelvic tilt, they had hyperlordosis in the lumbar spine, hyperkyphosis in the thoracic spine, they had protracted scapulas, medially rotated shoulders, and they had a forward head carriage. When performing a mobility assessment on them, they had a positive active straight leg raise test, Apley scratch test, Faber's test, and Thomas test. And when you performed the stability assessment on them, you found that they had very weak VMOs, gluteus maximus muscles, abdominals, supraspinatus, and infraspinatus. In this case, what you could do is start out with some mobilization exercises. You could work on some ankle inversion exercises to help with the pronation of the foot. You could do a straight leg raise with core activation to help with the hip biomechanics and core strengthening. You could do some knee tucks to help with the hyperlordosis in the lumbar spine. You could do a thoracic arm raise to help with the thoracic hyperkyphosis. And you could do some chin tucks to help with the forward head carriage. For each of them, you would perform 20 repetitions, and that will take approximately 5 minutes. Then we can move on to the corrective strengthening exercises. The Peterson step up would be a great exercise to help strengthen the vastus medialis. A supine hip extension would be terrific for strengthening the weak glutes. A rectus abdominis, the segmental strengthening and reinforcement exercise for the subumbilical fibers, would be terrific for strengthening the abdominals and helping with the hyperlordosis in the lumbar spine. The segmental strengthening and reinforcement exercise for the inferior fibers of the trapezius would be great at helping the scapular retractors, and same with the rhomboids exercise, the segmental strengthening and reinforcement exercise for the rhomboids major. For all of the corrective exercises, you could perform 4 sets of 25 repetitions at a 1010 tempo, and you could finish it off with the extensor chain wall lean for 3 minutes. That will take you 20 minutes. And then we're left with a little bit of time to do some stretching. To help with the excessive hip flexion and anteversion of the pelvis, we can do some myofascial stretching for the psoas and the rectus femoris. And to help with the medial rotation and the protraction of the scapula, we could do something like a myofascial stretching exercise for the pectoralis major and the anterior deltoid. That will take 8 minutes and it will bring the whole routine to 33 minutes, which is right in line with their 30-minute time frame. But time is up, set number 4. And while we're resting, let's continue on with the practical applications. And let's say somebody comes to you presenting with pain in between their shoulder blades. They have 3 days a week to train, they have 45 minutes to train, and they have dumbbells and a cable machine available to them. You performed a postural assessment on them and you found that they had a hypolordotic lumbar spine, a hyperkyphotic thoracic spine, their scapula was upwardly rotated, it was protracted, and they had medially rotated shoulders and forward head carriage. When you performed a stability assessment on them, you found that they were very weak in their inferior trapezius, their rhomboids, and their infraspinatus. For this type of an individual, you could start out with some mobility work and do something like a Mackenzie press up for 20 repetitions. This is going to be great for improving the lumbar extension and helping to correct the hypolordosis in the lumbar spine. Then, for the second exercise, we can superset a sideways neutral grip hand over opposite hip external rotation with a mid-pulley trap 3 raise. For both of them, we could perform 2 sets of 12 repetitions using a 4:0:20 tempo and resting 60 seconds in between each set. The sideways neutral grip hand over opposite hip external rotation, that's going to be terrific for strengthening the infraspinatus, and the mid-pulley trap 3 raise is going to be great for strengthening the rhomboids and the inferior fibers of the trapezius. Then we can move on to the main portion of the workout. That is going to be the lat pull down. For the lat pull down, they could do 4 sets of 12. When you do a lat pull down, you are going into downward rotation of the scapula, and this is going to help to counteract the upward rotation that they currently have. And we could also do a bent over reverse dumbbell fly for 4 sets of 12 repetitions. This is going to be great for strengthening the rhomboids. It's also going to be great for strengthening things like the inferior trapezius if they are actively engaging it and bringing their shoulders down into scapular depression. But that's going to take about 15 minutes. So between the Mackenzie press up, the corrective exercises, and those exercises, right now we're at about 30 minutes. So we have about 15 minutes to kill. Because they have forward head carriage, we could spend 3 minutes doing the extensor chain wall lean, and then we could spend another 10 minutes doing some myofascial stretching on the rectus abdominis, the pectoralis major, the anterior deltoid, and some PNF stretching for the suboccipitals. That's going to help open up the chest, bring them more into laterally rotated shoulders, bring them into more scapular retraction and depression, and help with the forward head carriage. But our time is up. Time for the 5th and final set. Thanks for sticking around until the end of the video. Be sure to like, share, and leave a comment as it'll help the algorithm. And if you enjoyed the content, show your support by subscribing to the channel by clicking on the icon in the bottom right corner. And if you really want to show your support, then consider becoming a member by clicking on the icon in the bottom left corner. These new high quality videos aren't cheap to edit, and the $5 membership will really help with the video editing budget. You'll also get access to a ton of exclusive perks like early access to videos and this program design lecture playlist in the top right hand corner. And if you want to learn how to do a one-armed pull-up, then check out the playlist on the top left corner.